Hi
everyone!
We're here for the third installment in our 2022 reading recap reviews series.
March has its turn.
March is upon us.
Yeah.
The way this works is that we take turns talking about the books we've read. We sort of cover a lot of the stuff we've read in the first part, but then we hyper focus in on our favorites towards the end of the video.
Yeah, thereabouts.
So I think, as always, Mackie's gonna
kick us off on my graphic novel binge, which is a standard thing these days.
I feel like that's pretty typical for you.
Yeah, it's therapy actually. It's just all right. Let's see what's next. And my subscriptions do me well. So Lost Falls by Kurt Pyers, I want to say. I probably butchered that. I apologize. It's a Lovecraftian sort of like murder mystery type, you know, Twin Peaks meets Cthulhu. It's
Cthulhu.
I try. Well, maybe not the actual like old ones from the deep, but there is that sort of like lingering, sort of like what is going on kind of vibe, to the point of madness type deal. And I really wanted to like this series, the series, but it just didn't sort of like land well. Not because it wasn't written badly. I think it's just me and the genre don't mix. It's received pretty good reviews on its own. So if you like your sort of like detectives going to like a sleepy little town by a fall, you know, kind of like a waterfall type deal, just to make it extra poignant or picturesque or eerie, depending on the time of day, then this is probably for you. It's not for me, so there's that. Speaking of things that I tried so hard to really like, this is Dragonwatch Book 5, Return of the Dragon Slayers.
I'm gonna link our mid-year book freakout talk because he actually talks about
I talked about this a little bit. And Dragonwatch is supposedly sort of like the next cycle of books in the Fablehaven series, where we have a brother and a sister who sort of discover that their grandparents are actually caretakers of magical, preserves, right? Where the magical creatures of the world have been relegated to these, parks, these preserves, and just to maintain balance over the world, etc. After surviving the really epic repercussions of the first 5-book series, this next piece sort of talks about sort of like their burgeoning, almost near young adulthood, right? They're in their mid-teens now and a little older. I liked where it was going, sort of like the start. I just feel like towards the end, I can defend everything that Brandon Mull has done here and say, yeah, that was the right thing to do. It just doesn't necessarily mean that I was like, woohoo, that was like, oh, that's exactly how I wanted it to go. So I really feel like this is just more, I was feeling it was going in another direction, and then the author just went, it's over here. And I'm like, okay, I respect that. It's just, I'm also like, oh.
But personally, you're more like,
I'm like, oh, all right. And that's fine. Again, it's still well written. It does tie off a lot of the loose ends. Like, there's no cliffhangers here. I don't know that there's going to be more, because I don't know how much larger you can get with dragons. Plus, with the Dragon Slayers around, what else is there that they haven't already defeated or whatever? So I don't know. Yeah, I tried hard and got so far, and in the end, I didn't really like it that much that I thought that I would. But it's cool. Do check it out anyway if you love the Fablehaven series, if only just to understand how Seth and Kendra have fared, as like youngish adults. Briefly,
just going to mention, I reread Chamber of Secrets this month. As Mackie said in a previous reading recap video, the real only thing you need to know about that one is Harry is a sass bucket.
He 100% is.
And that gets re-emphasized for me every time I reread that series, because I'm just like, yeah, he really is a sass bucket, isn't he?
I mean, Daniel,
he's got a lot of opinions.
Right, and Dan, and the way Daniel Radcliffe sort of like plays him, he's just like this, like,
It's a bit more stoic.
Yeah, just sort of like serious. What's going on. Very sort of like you feel so bad
Which
for
is
him.
not a bad take either. It's just a very specific one.
Yeah, but here, like, if anybody has any real Marauders headcanon in their heads, this is James's kid. Like, know.
100%.
I mean, held back. There's a lot of Lily in there, but there's some that you see the James sort of just.
Again, this was a nostalgia thing for me, so revisited that. Another thing I reread this month was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. The second book in the Throne of Glass series, so we're not going to get into the plot of it. Suffice to say, I quite enjoyed it. There are still parts of this one that still like get me in the feels, like all the time. And obviously, a lot of that has to do with the fact that my favorite male character in the series gets a big part in this book, both in a good way and a not so great way. I just enjoy it. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, like, that's one of the reasons
Whose best friend is Adderlin's assassin. Anyway.
Like, I just turned that into a musical. I don't know. To continue on the Sarah J. Maas train, I also actually read
this book.
House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the Crescent City series. This actually took me longer to read than I thought it would, and it's not because it's massive, which it is.
It is.
It is because I don't know, actually. I'm still trying to figure that out, because overall, like, by the time I hit the end, I was like, oh, I really enjoyed that. Like, I had a fun time.
Yeah.
So part of it is maybe I was just savoring it. because there's so much being packed into these pages. Like, so many things are happening. And for me, like, generally the way I operate with Sarah's books is like I will just jump into them and just let her carry me through to the end, which always works for me because then I just end up on this emotional roller coaster of like, I have no idea what turn it's gonna take, but let's just go. Though I will say, just non-spoilery way, I guessed something very early on in this, and when I was proven right at that, I was like, I knew it. But apparently I was one of the only people in my circle who knew it, which I'm like,
Really?
but it was kind of like right there for me.
I missed that too, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, I totally missed
yeah.
it. No, it's just
I
because
don't know why. Like, for me, like, instantly, I was like, yes.
It has to do with Alexa's like archetypes that she gravitates towards. So she sort of knows how they think and what they look like, so she can smell them from a mile away.
Okay, anyway, since this is a second installment, what I will say about it is that it amps up everything after the end of the first book. The plot amps things up. We get more of the world building. We have romances. There's plenty of banter, and now you get even stronger me and my chosen family vibes in this one. Like,
kind of, yeah.
There's an even, not a bigger, like the ensemble cast is coming together even more in this one, and I quite enjoyed it. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Like, also, just a brief, like, we're just gonna drop the ending. The ending, like, what are we gonna do about the ending? I don't know.
Growling on the inside just about that ending.
That's House of Sky and Breath for you. And then I read a very, very hyped romance book, and that is The Spanish Love Deception, which is by Elena Armas. And this has the fake dating trope in it.
Sure.
So basically, Catalina has a rival, or kind of an enemy at her office, and she ends up somehow making an agreement with this person to take him, and this person named Aaron, to take him to a wedding, a family wedding, as her date.
Okay.
You know, because that's how that works.
I mean,
fake dating, enemies to lovers.
Is time honored.
I wouldn't say this is.
Was there one bed?
Actually, yes, yes.
Who does not?
It's not a new favorite romance for me. I know a lot of people really, really love it, but for me, I was like, it was good, but it wasn't anything phenomenal. I do think she wrote some really great moments into it, which I'm like, even now I still think of pretty fondly. I think for me the problem was that I found some of it, like the pacing and the writing, like just a little clunky, especially at the start. I also thought that the main character, Catalina Lena, she was frustrating. Even though I could sympathize with her, like there were things she did or thought where I was like, girl, you're the one causing this problem for yourself. Like, let's not go there. I also had the same issue with her love interest, Aaron. Sometimes I'm like, dude, just communicate. That frustrates me a lot, by the way. Like, I'm not necessarily one of those people who's against miscommunication, but I'm also like, at least talk, please.
Oh yeah.
Just talk it out. I mean, it was a fun romance to read, and I'm definitely gonna keep an eye out for this author's next work, just to see like what else she's got to offer us. Then I read the first paranormal book club pick for the first quarter of the year, and that is Angelfall by Susan E. This is like an old school dystopian paranormal urban fantasy type story, where a teen named Penryn is gonna do anything that she needs to in order to get her sister back from the angels who took her.
Sure.
And that includes helping out an angel who's supposedly the enemy, so they end up teaming up in this one. I had heard great things about the series. The only reason I hadn't really put it top of my list to check out is because I've also heard not so great things about the rest of it.
Alright, that's fair.
I did actually surprisingly enjoy this way more than I thought. Susan E.'s storytelling is super compelling, especially because she was able to really bring this gritty, sort of darker, dystopic world to life.
Sure.
I also like the way she paced the plot, because it just unfolds really well. Like, it's very it's steadily paced all throughout. Like, there was never a moment where I was like, oh, there's a lull here, and like I'm starting to lose interest. I definitely have questions left about the world and the characters and their story, so I'm kind of tempted to continue on with the series. Like, I don't know if I will. It's definitely not top of my list or anything, but like I am curious because I kind of want to know, because something happens at the end where I'm just like, but where are you gonna go from here though? Like, what is next? Like, what? It was good. I'm glad I actually finally got the chance to read it, so I'm glad Rachel or DJ was the one who picked it for our book club. And then for the other book club I'm in, which is the family book club, we actually took a turn and did a graphic novel, which is In by Wynne MacPhail. Even months after, like right now, and thinking about this one, I feel like I still don't know exactly how I feel about it.
Fair.
The concept is pretty simple because it tackles the author's sort of detachment from the people in the world around him. There are concepts in it and like particular panels, I want to say, that I found super relatable, and I liked the way he would represent the feeling of being in, or being like in with someone or with the world. For me personally, I didn't really, like, the art style is not a standout for me, the story was not a standout for me. The humor was like 50-50, like it was pretty spot on for the most part, but there were definitely some moments where I was like, not my thing. It was a quick read, it was interesting, and it definitely brought up a lot of interesting themes. Gotta keep going because there's quite a few books I read. This is actually one of my better reading ones this year. The next book is The Bone Orchard, which is by Sarah A. Mueller.
Yes.
This is about a character named Charm. Charm works in a house called Orchard House, and she basically takes care of tending the trees over there in the orchard, and her children, Shame, Justice, Desire, Pride, and Pain. It's a story where she's the madam of this house, and she has ties to the emperor. When the emperor basically is on his deathbed, he summons her, and he tells her that she has to find out which of his sons is going to be held responsible for his murder, who is responsible for his murder. This book was dark.
I'm sure.
Which, I mean, like, honestly, you can expect that just based on the summary. The beginning was a little bit clunky because there's like a specific way that Sarah Mueller writes, and it wasn't necessarily particularly my cup of tea, but I do find the setup of this world very interesting, and that's what carried me through the story, because I don't think I've read anything quite like it. Tying that in together with the plot, which is very court intrigue and like secrets being revealed and mysteries being unraveled, it kept me hooked really until the end, even though I was kind of like, what is going on half the time? I would have liked to feel personally connected to the characters. That would have probably helped, but I also wonder if the detachment is a specific thing, just because that sort of ties into the plot of the story. I can't really say much more for fear of spoilers. This is one where I definitely think content warning should be checked, because there's a lot of dark stuff in this book. Interesting, not necessarily new favorite, but I don't regret reading it just because I thought it was just such an interesting book. That's really all I have to say about that one. And then I started reading a series. Like, now this is one of the series where I just genuinely think it's a great series. The book is An Heir Comes to Rise, and this is by C.C. Peñaranda. Chloe C. Peñaranda now is how the moniker she goes by. Anyway, this is about Faith. She is an orphaned human who is a very talented fighter. She and her best friend, Jacka, they kind of want a better life, and one of the ways she's able to sort of earn more money towards them getting that is by her fighting. But then she catches the attention of a Fae guard named Nick, and she kind of discovers some things about herself that she didn't know before, and that sort of unfolds from there. So whenever I pick up a new fantasy series starter, I'm always like hoping that it's gonna be the start of a relationship with that series, you know? Like, it's kind of like a blind date. You don't know much going into it, and then you just hope for the best.
Oh yeah.
But also are kind of like realistic about it, and you're like, it's not always gonna click. Luckily with this series, it actually clicked really well. One of the things I appreciate is that Chloe really weaves in those typical fantasy tropes. Like, these are not things you haven't seen before in other stories, but she also manages to create a world and some lore that, you know, feels different, that feels very specific to the series. And then she also created an ensemble cast of characters, which is one of my favorite things.
Okay.
And she wrote those characters really well and wrote their relationships really well. And then I was basically really hooked on this book. So I quite enjoyed the series starter. It is not my favorite of the series.
Okay.
We'll get to that later.
Interesting.
But I really enjoyed it. It was a solid beginning, and then it led to more eventually. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Just a couple more books. I also read For Aunties and a Wedding, which is by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is the follow-up to Dial for Aunties, which was one of the books I enjoyed thoroughly last year. In this one, the main character, Madeline Chan, is finally getting married, and it's great, except that she finds out that the family business that she hired to take care of the wedding planning is also kind of tied to the mafia. And shenanigans ensue from there. Like, this book is literally exactly like its predecessor in that there are shenanigans. I did not expect anything else, let's be real. The thing that works the best for me with this book is that all of the elements that I enjoyed in the first one are still here. It's like family is the heart of the story. She also integrates Indo-Chinese culture, which has aspects that feel relatable to me, because there are a lot of aspects of different Asian cultures that kind of cross over.
Intermingle.
And honestly, because I knew there were going to be over-the-top shenanigans, just from reading the other book, I was like, listen, I'm fine with anything. Like, I will take it. I think that a lot of the story, though, really relies on stuff that happens in the first book. So this is not something that you can just pick up and read without knowing too much about the first book.
Sure.
I mean, you could, but it probably wouldn't be as fun.
The conspiracies that have been, you know, woven alone, right?
I mean, I really did enjoy this one, although I feel like I didn't quite enjoy it as much as the first book. I would still recommend checking it out, though, if you enjoyed the first one, because, like, come on. Betty and her aunt and the shenanigans, let's go.
It's like the Avengers, but the Golden
But
Girls.
oh my gosh, it's the Avengers and Gold.
Right.
Okay, and
Accurate.
then I finished a duology. I got to mention Victoria Schwab again this month, and that is the Monsters of Verity duology. The first book is This Savage Song, and the second book is Our Dark Duet. This series, this duology, follows two main characters. There's Kate Harker, who wants to be as ruthless as her father. She wants to basically, I don't know, rule in the same way he does. And then you have August, who all he wants is to be human and to be good.
He's a nice boy, isn't he?
Okay, when I read The Savage Song years ago, I really enjoyed it. And then rereading it again, Victoria Schwab has a brilliant mind. I don't know how she gets these ideas and crafts them into such interesting stories. Like, she's just a master at that, I think.
Yeah.
First time I read it, it did take me a little bit longer than I would like to settle into the world and to really understand its inner workings and to feel for these characters.
Yep.
But eventually, like, at some point I was like, oh my gosh, I care so much, and like I really want to know what happens to them. So luckily I dove right into Our Dark Duet, which I'm not going to talk too much about because Maki hasn't read it yet.
I have not. I plan to. I'm still reading Savage Song, by the way.
The story concept carries over onto this one. It's just really refreshing because it's different from a lot of the typical YA fantasy stories that I do pick up and read. My favorite thing about this duology, not just this book, but in general the duology, is like how she's grappling with the idea of monsters. What makes you a monster, how you face the darkness within you and without you, all of those themes. And it's so interesting. I like that this parallels a lot it parallels with the first book almost exactly, except that obviously the only thing that has really changed is that our two main characters are different at the end of the first book, and so they're different in this book. It was just, it was so satisfying to just see their story play out and to get to the resolution of it, so yeah, that was definitely worth checking out. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to you for a second so you can talk about the things you really loved.
Yeah, and
in March.
And this shouldn't take too long, because so again, we're talking graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
The one that I particularly liked was I Am the Black Widow by Kelly Thompson. So Kelly has been doing some really phenomenal work with Natasha Romanoff. I mean, she's basically Marvel's James Bond. You know what I mean? Like, you know, international super spy / superhero, woman of a million faces, right? Just, you know, the legend is great. And this one is basically, you know, Natasha recovering from something, again, another really, really good run, and the repercussions of that. And Team Widow, yeah, I can say that.
Team Widow,
yeah, she has a base of operations. She has some heroes that she is coordinating with. I think one of the ships that I have in the Marvel Universe for like ever in a million years is always going to be Natasha and Bucky, because they understand what it's like to be just like puppets of a terrible regime that needs super spies and assassins.
That's true.
And, you know, he may or may not have made cameos in her books in the past, and, you know, I don't know if they're on and off. I want to say over the decades.
Yeah.
Pretty sure they weren't in this particular series, but you can sense that there's like a deep abiding, like, it's you and me forever. We'll figure it out.
That
you know what I mean? Like, it's or
That's
I'm just totally projecting. I don't know.
I mean,
who says it can't be both? All I know is that you know, Team Widow is alive and well and super dope in this one, and
kicking.
Oh, lots of kicking. And I think because of the you know, like at the time they were foreshadowing sort of like Yelena's sort of entrance into the MCU. I believe there's some Yelena action in this one too. She's not quite Florence Pugh, because this one's not quite Scarlett Johansson either.
Pugh as Yelena, though.
But Yelena Belova is a thing, and they do have a sisterhood there that they do capitalize on. So obviously Kelly Thompson, love that work. And then next is sort of like a 1-2 punch that I did not know were connected by Chip Zdarsky. Daredevil Volume 6, Doing Time, sort of focuses on Matt Murdock doing time as Daredevil.
I was about to be like, doing time?
He did some crazy fangled thing where he made the whole world forget that Daredevil was Matt Murdock, and, you know, so nobody really knows who's who and what. And so as Daredevil, he's in prison for whatever crimes blah blah blah. So I kind of liked that arc. It was nice because it's like, who's Daredevil basically on the outside? Well, Elektra took on the thing, and now she has these blunted sighs, which is, so now it's just basically, you know, like mini Eskrima sticks that are metal with wings. Just basically, that's all that. And she's basically.
I'm sorry, but that description is really funny.
I'm stupid when it comes to these, and so she's basically still thrashing people to an inch of their lives, but but not killing them, because she's doing it for Matt. And that's fine.
Good for you.
But what I didn't think I would appreciate, another, I guess this is obviously an original Chip Zdarsky thing called the All-Nighter, where you have...
my brain went to My Hero.
I know, it's just, it feels like a superhero movie book,
but
and
it's not.
It is.
Oh, it is.
But here's the twist. So vampires have to, I'm gonna start with that. Vampires have to keep a low profile. But then one night, a particularly young vampire with his like tiny little coven that run an overnight diner.
They run a diner.
The all-nighter, anyway, or something like that.
Oh, I can't.
Or whatever. I don't know. I forget. But the point is, but that's the thing. He just basically flips pancakes and like they just run the diner when the sun sets, and then when the sun sets.
Sounds like an anime. Honestly.
And they close, right? He prevents mugging and decides, I can do this. This is something good. And so
why is that so wholesome sounding?
It really is. And so he starts dressing up in superhero garb, fighting crime as a vampire. It's the wildest, cutest concept. I don't know if Chip will appreciate, I say Chip like we're, but he'll appreciate that.
I've been using first.
But I think it's the cutest thing, and I love it. And of course there's violence, and of course but it's not that gritty. And I think he calls himself the All-Nighter, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, honestly, that makes sense.
Because, and you can't really fight crime in the day, because, burning up in flames, I hear is a problem for vampires that aren't daywalkers or don't have...
Or don't have the rings.
Yeah. Those of you who know, you know. And so yeah, obviously that was like the pièce de résistance of my March read, assuming I even read this in March. But it was a series, so.
Okay, 2 books. First we have In a New York Minute, which is by Kate Spencer. This is a very rom-com type book in which our main character, Franny, has a really bad day. She gets let go from her job, she has an incident on the subway. Luckily, there is this nice guy named Hayes who kind of helps her out on the subway incident. And someone takes a video of that and it goes viral. And that's sort of their meet cute and how they meet. I really enjoyed this one. This was a recommendation from my friend Rachel of Hello Chelly because she loved it. And I loved that this book just calls to mind older rom-com films, especially the ones set in New York City. It was just heartwarming and lovely, and it was just a good time. Like, yes, some of the things felt a little out of left field, very film, movie, magic type things, but like, I didn't really care because I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed getting to know both the characters, Franny and Hayes, and I was immediately able to click with both and root for them, both to succeed in their individual journeys in the story, but also to get together. I also was a huge fan of the secondary cast. I loved their group of friends and like family. So great. And it helps that this book is set in New York and there's a lot of like love and appreciation for New York in all its glory on the page. So this one was definitely a book that I'm so glad I picked up on Rachel's recommendation, and so glad I read immediately because it was just a delight all in all.
Lovely.
The last book we're going to talk about this video is one that I had been anticipating for some time. I did a panel, like I want to say in 2020 actually, where I met the author of this book, and she actually had talked about it, and I was really excited for it then. It's A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Island. The sequel is actually out this year also. I just have to read it. So A Magic Steeped in Poison is a YA fantasy series starter. I believe it's a duology, I want to say. Ning is our main character, and she feels guilty about the death of her mother, and she's worried for her sister because her sister is starting to deteriorate from some poison. And she hears that there's going to be a competition to become the kingdom's greatest Shanongshi, which is basically a master of ancient and magical tea making. So she travels to the city to compete because if she wins, she will get a favor from the princess, and that might be the only way she can save her sister's life. Things are not so simple because it turns out there is a lot going on at this court, and Ning suddenly finds herself involved in all that. This is one of those rare experiences where I read the first line of this book and I was already immediately like, yes, I am so drawn into the story and I need to know what's going to happen next. It does lean a lot on familiar YA fantasy tropes, and in particular for me, the plot isn't something I haven't seen before in other stories, but I really enjoyed the magical lore, especially the legends that the author wove in, and the whole like process of her explaining like the magical properties of tea, like from the ingredients to how it's brewed to like how you perform your tea ceremony. It was so fascinating. And plus the fact that she was able to combine a tournament with also this sort of court intrigue aspect of like political unrest and subterfuge. Like, I thought that was really, really cool. I do wish again, like one of my things is I love connecting with characters, and I do wish I felt a stronger connection to at least our main character Ning, if not some of the other side characters. But all in all, I'm super glad I read this one, and I'm very excited for the sequel to see how things wrap up. Plus, this is a very pretty edition. This is the Barnes & Noble edition, that's why the foiling is blue. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one too. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this particular video. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you have thoughts, comments, feelings, reactions, questions, anything, leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in a new video soon. Bye!